Hello, welcome to our first class of Introduction to Writing for Documentary. My name is Yao Frimpong and this is for level 200. Welcome to the unique course of level 200. That is writing for the documentary film. This means that in this class we create stories. However, these stories are set in reality. It means that we create from what indeed has existed and does exist, whether we can see it or not. The question then is, how do we convince people that what we are talking about indeed do exist in the manner that we are talking about? Is every reality a story well told? Welcome to discipline, hard work, and creative thinking. This course will be experienced only in this first semester of this year only. After that, we'll go on to convert the found story into a manner that will be usable for a film. That is to say, learn how to write the film script, but for documentary. By the end of today, however, you should know the terms of engagement between me and you, the syllabus of this semester's course, procedure of assessment of your work in this class. At the end of this semester, there will be an examination. Currently, documentary writing forms one part of the two sections of the script writing exams. So whatever marks you get in the exams of this course will form 50% of the total script writing examination results. Those of you who've had the opportunity to see the course outline for the fiction writing will realize that fiction takes the other 50%, and this documentary takes 50%. The other 50% will come from the exams of our fiction writing class, which lectures will take place during a different session. However, these various 50% marks of the two sections of the course will together constitute 70% of your annual scores in this course. Apart from the end of semester exams, you are also mandated to do a number of class exercises as part of your continuous assessment. Results from the test of these class exercises will thus form 30% of your academic marks for the year. And note, that 30% is also shared between the classwork of documentary writing and fiction writing. In addition to the tests and examinations, you will undertake a group exercises with a duration of between 3 to 5 minutes as observation exercise productions at the end of the semester. Your membership to any of these groupings for these observation exercises at the end of the semester will be done by the production department once registration is fully over. In these exercises, I expect a full group participation, which means in all true aspects of the word, the whole group will have to fully participate in it. And as such, I will not meet any group unless they are meeting me in a full complement of the group. Failure to attend these group meetings would mean that one has removed oneself from that group and that such person would be treated as such, which means that that person is considered as not being part of the group. For each group to get to shoot their observation films, they will have to come up with a concept and develop a proposal outline for the concept, and then suggest a structure for shooting and editing before they go on location. The concept development part is different from the shooting part. For this level, the concept development will include the development of a reason for observation, a proposal of approach, and a shooting guide. Consequently, by the end of this semester, I should have taught you what constitutes a documentary story, how to present that story in a form of a concept, and finally, how to see your film before it is made in the form of a proposal outline and a shooting guide. Again, consequently, in developing your stories for the group work, each group will also have to produce these steps in the development of their stories before shooting. Each step will have to be approved with my signature before you can move to the next step. So work diligently and start early, because there is a deadline after which I will not sign any script. The deadline after which groups of students will not be allowed to shoot their films will be determined by the production department and conveyed to you in the course of the semester, so watch out for it. If you miss this deadline, consider yourself having been referred in that subject, and you will have to talk to the academic office for rescheduling. In the meanwhile, as we wait for the production department to bring these groupings, we are also going to create an ad hoc groupings on our own by random selection. These groups will be used for the various class exercises we will be doing both inside and outside the lecture hall, and for this particular course and also other courses that I will be teaching. As part of the class group film exercise, I will expect every student to give me a story outline for which marks will be awarded as part of your class exercises. To get a hang of it, we will endeavor to do one of such an exercise together in the class to help us have a good hang of it. Now, let me explain this a little bit. What we're saying is that at the end of the semester, we'll do what we call an observation exercise. Now, this observation exercise will suggest that you pick a topic and possibly an event and try to film it and make a story out of it. So as part of this class, we will try to create that as a class work. We will pick a topic and look at how we can develop the proposal outline, the shooting guide, and all that is the processes that we have to go through to serve as an example for you to prepare your own at the end of the semester. During the production process of the group work, there will also be peer assessment, and the marks accumulated in these areas will be part of the continuous assessment of your work in this semester. So learn to work as an inclusive, efficient, and diligent group member so that your own group members will not mark you down. Again, let me explain. If you're in a group of 4 or 5, each member of the group is going to assess the other members of the group according to what they think their contribution to the work is. The idea is that one should not stay away and expect that his colleagues will put together the work for him to come and enjoy the marks that come of it thereof. So if you do not appear, then it is expected that your group members will mark you down. So participate actively so that they can give you the best possible mark that you deserve for participating in the group. Now let's look at our course topics. What are we going to learn this semester? In this semester, we are going to look at what is documentary. In this context, we are talking about reality versus realism, truth versus fiction. Then we will look at the functional history of the documentary from reality recording to the avant-garde school of thought, avant-garde genre of documentary filmmaking. Then we will look at the properties of the documentary film. In week 4, we'll look at the types or genres of the documentary film. Then week 5, we'll start the thinking through process to how to capture a documentary film, how to make a documentary project. And in this particular point, we'll be looking at the proposal outline. What is the research that must go into it for you to be able to develop a proposal? Week 6, we'll continue with thinking through the documentary project, and actually write out what a proposal outline is. In week 7, we'll continue with thinking through the documentary project, and this time pay attention to how we gather the information that must be inside the film. Week 8, we'll continue with the thinking through the documentary project and assess how all that information gathered can be presented in an interesting manner. That's what we call it the interest line. Week 9, we will then actually write the documentary script based on all that thinking through that we've done before that time. We'll learn how to write a documentary script. And then week 10, we'll start the processes of developing our various observational exercises. So now let's look at the topic that we want to handle today. And today we are going to look at what is a documentary film. What is a documentary film? Now, some students say that documentary is, and I put in quotation, a type of film that is based on the real world and real people, expressing things as they exist, or telling about past activities in a supposedly truthful or objective manner. Others say that it has to do with a certain realism of style, that it is filming on some real location without actors, artificial props, or pre-constructed narrative. Let's look at the key words here. That it should be in a real world, and the people should be real, and they're expressing things that actually exist, or things that have existed, telling about the past, and that it must be truthful and objective, without color, they say, and that the filming should be on some real place, not a built-up place, not a created place, but a real place. And the people that we see should not be people who are acting. They should be real people, everyday person. That the props that we see should not again be created. It should be something that exists in that environment, and it should not be pre-constructed. Nothing must be created. So you could see that in many ways, everybody is talking about something being real, something unadulterated, being truthful, being objective, no color into it. The question really is that possible? Now, sometimes they also say that it is representing reality. So it is not just the reality itself, but a representation of that reality. And then the students go on to talk about there should be a lot of facts and truth as a necessary condition for a non-fiction film. Some may even suggest that it is nothing but the opposite of fiction. So for them, a film is either fiction or documentary. Film is either fiction or documentary. They can only fall into one of these two categories. So, can it then be justified in claiming that when one is working on a documentary film, when in fact what he does for a living is to install surveillance cameras at offices and shops? After all, this does seem to me the criteria of representing reality, of filming without the use of actors, and recording as truthfully as possible what is actually there. And it is not fiction. Do you get what I'm trying to say? That if you get somebody planting surveillance cameras, that surveillance camera is just recording what exists. It has not been created. It has not been acted out. Nothing has been added. No situation changed for the purpose of a story being told. It is real. It is truthful. It is happening. And it's coming from a surveillance camera. Is that documentary? At this point, people will begin to argue that certainly this mechanical type of recording and displaying video does not make the technician fixing those cameras a documentary filmmaker. Interesting. So even though the person has cameras, he has recorded reality. The events has unfolded. It's happened right in front of your eyes, no color. But suddenly they want to call that as mechanical type of recording. They want to call the one doing that mechanical type of recording a technician, not a cameraman. So suddenly it looks as if recording what actually exists is not enough to fall into the category of documentary filmmaking, isn't it? The suggestion here is that we need to see some artistic point of view, a message of some sort, a moral or ideological ambition with a film made. In short, a wish to make a difference, to change the world, or at least the way in which some relevant audience will look upon the world or themselves. Now that brings a different color to this whole thing. If we need to see an artistic point of view, doesn't it then become subjective? We've lost the objective aspect of it, is it not? If the film must have a message of some sort, shouldn't then a message be coming from a specific messenger? In which case, that messenger will bring his biases to the message that he's bringing to you. If it must have a moral or ideological ambition with a film made, can we say that people's morality are the same across board, such that everybody will consider the other person's morality as being the right one? Let's look at this documentary film and see whether we can categorize it as a documentary film, even if it did its right to call it a documentary film in the first place. Now, this is a recording, obviously used, done with a phone, of the state of roads in some part of our beloved country, Ghana. And on the extreme right, no, it's gone off now, but on the right of the picture, you could see some human beings walking along the road. Obviously, these are human beings that have had to get out of the vehicle and walk that stretch of the road because it seemed as if it was not advisable for them to be in the vehicle, considering the danger involved, considering the way the vehicles are behaving. So, if you look at this picture, somebody was at the scene holding a camera and recording what was happening at the scene. And you could see how this motorbike is struggling. Now, a small vehicle like this motorbike is struggling, let alone a vehicle of this weight. And you see how precarious the situation is. Is he making an ideological point with this? Can you say that this is a documentary film? You see that the taxi driver feels endangered, such that she needs to move away. The interesting thing is that the driver wouldn't stop. Is it because he's got enough experience to handle the situation and said that in spite of the difficulty in the terrain, he still would continue to move even with such dangerous looking tilt of the vehicle? I guess the point is made from what we are seeing. So you can go ahead with the lecture. All right. So even if a documentary film director may adopt the so-called observational mode, like what we've just seen, and try to be like a fly on the wall, which means that he's looking at the situation, he's not influencing it anyway, just observing, which is quite like the recording of a CCTV cameras or what we've just seen. This mode will still be a process which will require a lot of choices, both at the point of recording and at the editing stage. It is not just about recording what is there. So in this case, for instance, you could see that even on the set where the cameraman, the one holding the phone, was doing the recording, he kept moving the camera to show different things that he, the one handling the phone, thought was important for us to see at any point in time. At times it's the people, at times it's the vehicle, at times it's the taxi that is moving back, at times it's the motorbike. So even at that point in time, that person was making choices. So it's more about selecting and presenting and editing in such a way that we see present conditions in a manner that make us begin to look for alternatives that should be brought about. So you can see that the shape of the documentary is beginning to change a little bit. Yes, the issue of reality does exist. We must consider that. The issue of truthfulness may exist, that you may not use actors and so forth and so on, could be so, but you realize that you don't have the time to show everything. You probably have to select. Now, what will be the considerations for that selection? Therefore, documentary filmmaking and also the way we take in the information of the documentary film is all about ethics, politics, and aesthetic approach. And as such, it is highly subjective or personal matter, it is now argued. Once you're going to make choices, these choices will be based on practices that are acceptable. It will be made on politics, points that you want to make, that you want audiences to be interested in and possibly support. And also how to make it impactful, how to make it so attractive to the viewer, so that it is impactful. Now, once these elements come into play, once the issues of ethics, politics, and aesthetics come into play, and you have to make these choices, suddenly you realize that the film then becomes a highly subjective material. It is no more objective. It's no more something that is without color. And it has a personal attachment of the one who is making the film. That person's attachment is involved in making the film. At this point, there seems to be no difference between the documentary and the fiction films. They are all very personal to the writer. They both have some sort of message and even an ideological standpoint built into their characters, their action and setting. And they all intended to qualify as artistic and aesthetic products, making the world a little better and the audience a bit more enlightened about human life. So you see, at this point in time, the documentary and the fiction share a lot of common points, a lot of common issues. So then the question then stands there, then why do we differentiate it and call one documentary and the other fiction? The primary way to be able to differentiate the documentary from the fiction film is to try and trace its roots, the roots of the name itself. Documentary has its roots in the word document, which comes from the Latin docere, which means to teach. Now, as late as 1800, according to the Oxford English Dictionary document, what a lesson, documentary meant a lesson, an admonition, a warning. So what you are saying at this point in time is that if you are basing your meaning on this Oxford English Dictionary meaning, then a documentary must teach, it must admonish, it must warn. Fiction need not necessarily do that. Fiction's main objective is to entertain you first. And in the process of entertaining you, may teach you something. But teaching is not the main element. Documentary, on the other hand, as per this meaning of documentary in the Oxford English Dictionary, means that a documentary must teach. It must give you a lesson. It must admonish you to do something. It must warn you from something. So now you begin to see how the name is allowing us to do a certain amount of differentiation. Now, the first person to use the word documentary to describe the film is John Grierson, a British documentary filmmaker in the early part of the 20th century. When he wrote that Moana had documentary value, he would have been thinking of the modern meaning of document, that is, a record, which is factual and authentic. Note, so this point is introducing another aspect of the meaning of documentary, that over the years, by the 1920s, getting to 1930s, some kind of additional meaning of documentary had come about, which was not just to teach or admonish, but also to be based on a record, something that has been recorded and can be supported with facts, which will then make it authentic. So it means that documentary must teach you, but it must teach you with something that is recorded, something that is factual, something that is authentic. Fiction need not do that. For scholars, documents are a primary source of information. For lawyers, documentary evidence is opposed to hearsay or opinion. Now, perhaps Grierson was also thinking of the French use of documentaire to distinguish serious travelogues, ethnography from other sorts of early films that featured mere scenic views. Now, the early films was such that people just recorded whatever they saw. They had become so excited with film and its ability to record that anything that was seen was recorded. But over the period of time, you realize that they started showing serious work with places they visited and travel information. We are going to look at that in our next lecture. But I want you to understand that documentary has several meanings to it, and all these are pulling their meanings together to form what we call a documentary film today. So not only must it be authentic and must teach, it must be based on fact and also be something that is recorded. But even more so, it must have sources of information that can authenticate whatever it is that you are saying. So you don't just say something in a documentary film, you support it with evidence. After meeting Flaherty, Grierson carried the word and his developing aesthetic theory and sense of social purpose back to Great Britain. Grierson's personal definition of documentary then became the creative treatment of actuality, beginning with his own first film, the only one he personally directed, called Drifters, in 1929. British documentary advanced to become an established movement. So by 1929, some kind of crisp definition of what a documentary film is had come to be in place because of Grierson, and he called it the creative treatment of actuality. Now, the reason why this will gain currency over a period of time and eventually become almost acceptable as a description of documentary is the fact that John Grierson, among other documentary filmmakers, then started a documentary movement and established the making of documentary film. And that's why we still refer to them as the fathers of documentary filmmaking. Most of the characteristics we refer to in films today with the term documentary and see expressed in the films to which it is applied has been present in Griersonian films by the mid-30s. Documentary then is an artistic form, it's a technique and style that originated in motion pictures. Let me explain a little bit here. By the 1920s, the nature of film had been clearly established. Remember, by 1930, we've been able to put sound to film. So film as we know it today has been established. All the tenets of it, what was accepted and not accepted in filmmaking was established. And it was these tenets that was also incorporated into the documentary filmmaking process. So the artistic form and technique of the documentary film is steeped in film as it is in the fiction aspect. The techniques and everything is there like that. So it is just the nature, the structure of a documentary film that then begin to differentiate itself from the fiction. Now, radio documentary began in the early 30s in pioneering broadcasts of the British Broadcasting Corporation, and in March of Time, weekly series of the Columbia Broadcasting System. Television documentary, which usually means documentary film on video made for television, became standardized and later bastardized, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so for you to get a sense of what British Broadcasting Corporation created and became radio documentary, let me play for you a little bit of the documentary they made in the late 80s about Ghanaians who were being forced to return from Nigeria at that time.
Hello, and thank you for downloading Witness from the BBC World Service.
This documentary.
30 years ago, the Nigerian government suddenly ordered more than 1 million African migrants to leave the country. Most of them were Ghanaian. Alex Last has been speaking to just one of the people forced to leave.
It's late January 1983, and in Nigeria, the President Shehu Shagari has suddenly announced that all foreigners without the right paperwork have just weeks to leave the country. Almost all are West African, the majority are Ghanaian.
If they don't leave, they should be arrested and tried and sent back to their homes. Illegal immigrants, in fact, under normal circumstances, should not be given any notice whatsoever. If you break a law, then you have to pay for it.
In Lagos, a Ghanaian, Charles Ekowotu, is working as an assistant sales manager for a chemical firm, but technically he is an illegal immigrant.
Someone told me there was a deadline that minister will hand over every power to every civilian, that every civilian can do anything to any alien in the country.
And it was that threat, any Nigerian citizen can take action against...
Oh yes, when the deadline expires, you will be giving the power to every Nigerian, every citizen. You have nowhere to hide in Nigeria because wherever you are staying with a Nigerian. So that made everyone scared.
Across Nigeria, up to 2 million migrants heeded the warnings. They packed what they could into trucks, cars, pickups and taxis and tried to get out of the country. The main route home to Ghana.
Well, I believe that you would have had some kind of appreciation of how the radio documentary is at this time. So let's continue. Now, more recently, courtroom television and survivor programs and other reality entertainments have become popular. In fact, the word documentary is by now so pervasive and much abused. But Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary offers us the primary meaning of documentary. A documentary film, even the highly questionable validity of Wikipedia defines the term in its traditional sense. Now, let's look at some of the modern day courtroom scenarios that give us an idea of how the trend is going and whether we can call them documentaries as well. This is supposed to be a courtroom situation. And it's a courtroom that has been recorded. This has not been acted out. So let's listen to this. it.
We now join Rashida
see
Lucas and T.P.
whether
Lucas as Judge Lynn hears their case.
Satisfies the
Mr. Lucas, you
element
have brought Mrs.
of
Lucas here to court in
documentary.
order to recover either your 2000 Camry that you said you upgraded or the value of the upgrades that you put in the Camry that you say she took. And I know that you're wearing sunglasses, which usually is not permitted in a courtroom, but I understand that you have an eye issue, glaucoma, and the lights are bothering you. Mr. Lucas, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you tell me how we got here and why it is you've needed to come to court to get this car back?
Well, Your Honor, there was nothing wrong, nothing. You know, everything was normal at my house.
Everything was normal?
Nothing wrong, nothing. Rashida told me, baby, I'll be back. And she left, you know, this was back in November.
Mrs. Lucas, Mr. Lucas says you had a great relationship.
Yes, we had a wonderful relationship.
Why don't you tell me what was wonderful about it?
It was wonderful. We were like best friends. I believe, you know, he's my soulmate. Everything was fine except...
Except?
He was too nice. It's too nice. I mean,
how does one be too nice to one's wife?
He was too nice, like, it was scary nice. You know, it was like, you know the people that's it was like stalkerish nice, like you too nice, it's too
Give
good
me an
to
example,
be true.
because I cannot conceive of the world that you have structured for me here.
Right, I mean, you know, too nice, like, he would say, I love you, and it was like, I was like, okay, I was waiting for the punch, when you gonna kick me? It's scary. Some people just, you know, you could be nice, but you could be
Lucas,
too nice.
you're gonna have to do better than that. He told you he loved you, and this was a problem. You put up your hands like, when is the punch gonna come? You've been married for 5 years. Has he punched you yet?
No. No, he's a
he
wonderful
doesn't
man.
punch you. He's a wonderful man.
Yes, I'm just not
so
used to
the
that.
I love you is too much for you.
It's not too much, but you don't have to tell me like twice a week.
Okay. I'm sure you are probably laughing. Now, is this a documentary? The setting is not acted. It's a courtroom. It's a real situation. The people are not paid actors. They are real people litigating a real situation. So, is it a documentary or it isn't? Is it a creative treatment of actuality? Is that what it is? Has this been altered in any way? Your guess is as good as mine, but let's continue. So, after seeing so many films that can be termed as documentary, it seems as if the concept cannot be defined. It is still a very important exercise that, at least as an academic exercise, we try to pin down what we mean by documentary, and not just in academic discussions about film theory. Does it make a difference how we conceive a major genre or label a specific film? In everyday life, look through the schedules for TV programs or film festivals using terms like fiction, documentary, drama, reportage, comedy, and nature film. It seems quite obvious to us what a documentary is, and we'll probably call it ridiculous and feel cheated if someone labeled Love Brewed in the African Pot as a documentary film. Definitions can be of many sorts, depending on how strict you want to be. A proper definition or a definition of essence would characterize exactly what it is that makes up this group of films, and would spell it out in such a clear way that it would be easy to assess whether a specific film belonged or did not belong to this group of genre. What are the necessary and sufficient features to identify strictly what a documentary film is? How does documentary film differ from other types of film that may well be set in reality as well as per the television production we saw a few minutes ago? Now, the continuous mechanical recording of a raw tape lacks the touch of someone selecting and editing for the purpose of expressing or communicating something to someone. So that cannot be a recording. That cannot be a documentary film. If you record a CCTV output, that can be a documentary film. The example above with the surveillance camera indicates that recording reality is too vague a criterion, and not just because reality sooner or later becomes a very difficult concept to narrow down. Just think about the reality TV programs in which almost everything is a construction. Both fiction and non-fiction films differ markedly from a simple imitation of mimicking what already exists. This, among other things, revealed through the camera work. All the intentional changes such as camera moves, cuts, compositions, all sorts of adjustment can come from human intervention. And through the post-production process of organizing various soundtracks and visual tracks into a whole that was not there before. Indeed, at the editing stage, there are so many effects and sounds that can be added to something that you recorded in reality and wasn't there. Would you then consider that as a recording of actuality? Time may be condensed, I beg your pardon, and the chronology changed. Music, subtitles, voiceover added, shots may be interlaced or interrupted by wipes, etc. As a rule of thumb, a film is hardly a film without camera work, cuts, or editing. And it's neither fiction film nor documentary, if it is nothing more than a representation of what happened to be in front of a lens and a microphone. A film is not a mere representation, but a willed presentation of something made by someone in a specific way and for someone. The phrase representation of reality is utterly mistaken as a definition of documentary because the idea of film as mirroring is a false one and a very misleading ideal. Let me explain this. The fact that we call something a film, whether it is fiction or documentary, is that it has gone through a process of camera work, sound recordings, editing work, and it's all come together to give you that experience on the screen, which seeks to affect you, the viewer, in a particular way. And therefore, a documentary film cannot just be a reflection of the reality that exists every day. To say that documentary film is a representation of reality and therefore it is just a reflection of what is existing then is not exactly true. That's what this whole write-up means. Also, the term reality is confusing. It may have the straightforward positive connotation of facing reality and seeing things as they truly are, really are. But often enough, it is interpreted by students in a theoretical discussion as just filming normally or in an objective way without being creative or manipulative, just the facts. That is also contentious. Which way is objective? The fact that you put the camera at a particular point is a choice. How do you declare that that choice is objective? Perhaps from your perspective, but not from the other person's perspective. To believe that reality is made up first of objective facts and secondly by subjective or personal sentiment is to make you yourself blind and deaf to the prevailing power structures and ideologies of this world. This, however, does not mean that it is all right to disregard facts or to tell a lie in a non-fiction film. It must be noted that the truth of a film can be understood in other ways. A lot of facts or statements about facts that can be verified may be present even in a fiction film. The whole story may be pure fantasy, the characters fictitious, and the behavior of the actors may consist of incredible stunts, but still, the film may be striving for truth. in another sense of the word, true emotions, and perhaps even to illustrate some more general truths about human life. And here, let me give you an example about things in human bodies that we do not see, and at times have to create a fictitious scenario to illustrate those things that we do not see, or not fictitious but fantasy to illustrate what we see. The fact that we do not see that reality doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and the fact that we use those fantasy pictures to illustrate that reality doesn't mean that it is fiction. So at the end of the day, it looks as if the truth and the creativity element must be geared towards a certain goal of establishing knowledge-based information supported by evidence, facts, and authenticity. So John Grierson, known as the founder of classic British documentary in the 1930s, coined the phrase creative treatment of actuality. It often comes as a surprise to students today to see that even at that time, the creativity of the documentary enterprise was underlined. They generally assumed that the creativity of documentary is a modern day invention. So we've gone through this whole scenario trying to determine what a documentary is. And I'm sure you probably are even more confused at the end of it than before, because it is still not clear cut. What we know is that it is set in actuality. What we know is that it is using film techniques, and therefore pictures, events, situations have been influenced somehow. What we know is that it is being created by individual, and therefore there's the very likelihood that that individual's biases has been brought to bear on the film that is being made. However, there are certain things that stand out. That the story is set in events that may have happened or can happen. And it is structured in such a way that as much as possible, what is shown is supported by evidence. And that's why at the end of the day, we call it a creative treatment of actuality. Next week, we'll look at how this whole documentary movement has evolved over the years, and perhaps it will help you to continue to form it. This is just to agitate your minds, set you thinking, look at documentaries, a lot more documentary films, and then over a period of time, you begin to see what is common among all these elements. Then we can come to a good conclusion, maybe not as a definition, but as a basis of understanding what documentary is. So, for us to truly appreciate what a documentary is, it will be important to have a cursory view of how this genre developed in the first place. In so doing, we'll be able to now list what can be classified as ingredients in the making of a documentary film. We'll end this lecture here today, and next week continue with those things that brought together documentary film for us to be able to continue to identify it. Have a good day and enjoy yourself.